I'm recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement. We have a meeting tonight with special guests. And the topics that we'd like to discuss, first of all, is the torture and murder of Gonzalo Lira. And I think we should observe 1 minute of silence for him before we begin our discussions. And then the other discussion would be on what are the telltale signs of a coup or regime change. And we have special guests that are very familiar with what the fingerprints look like for regime change. And very often, what happens is there is a lot of activity from the United States and Western countries where, NED, National Endowment for Democracy, where USAID, USAID come in and they start like handing out money and they start these big propaganda campaigns and they take over media and things like that. So these are just some general signs. So I just want to open the meeting. We have special guests tonight. We have Dan Kovalik. We have Stephen Sefton. We have Jeremy Kuzmarov. We have Lou Wolf. We have Craig Pasta Jardula, and we have Diane Sare. And every one of our special guests really brings some amazing things to the table. And I would like to point out that Gonzalo Lira is a journalist and a blogger, and he was very critical about the actions of the Zelensky administration and the government. And he was also on the Ukrainian kill list. And I just want to also say that tonight we have two other members on the kill list. We have Diane Sare and Jeremy Kuzmarov. And the kill list is real, it exists, and it's very serious. And I believe Jeremy had done some research and found out it literally comes out of Langley. So I'm not going to speak any more on that. I'm going to turn the floor over to Dan Kovalik, who has been to Ukraine and I think either twice or once in the last
Twice.
year.
Yeah, twice to Donetsk. Yeah, twice to Donetsk and once to Crimea as well.
Oh wow. Okay, so I'm gonna
In the
turn
last
over
year.
to Dan Kovalik, and I just want to say Dan Kovalik is a professor, a human rights attorney, a journalist, a author, and a filmmaker. And there's not much that Dan doesn't do, and I'm lucky to call him a friend and a colleague and someone that I turn to when I'm confused about things, and he's always been very, very supportive. Thank you, Dan. Please start us off.
And we're
Do you
going to
want
ask people to speak for 10 minutes approximately, if you can. That way we'll get everybody in and then allow some time for discussion. Thank you.
And if we could just do, before I turn the floor over to Dan, just 1 minute of silence for Gonzalo Lira, who was tortured and murdered for speaking the truth.
Okay. I think,
Unmute.
yeah.
Please, Dan, speak. Thank you.
So first of all, I want to say hi to everyone. It's very great to see old friends here, and Happy New Year to everyone. Coming into the year of the dragon, I believe, and we need more dragons to fight the empire. Steve and I have talked a lot about Gonzalo Lira over the past months. I think it's fair to say Gonzalo was a polarizing figure. I think a lot of us would take issue with some of the positions he held over the years. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he was a journalist. I once I was with Vijay Prashad one day, and we were talking about being journalists. I said, I don't know if I'm really a journalist. And he said, come on, man. He said, you're a journalist. You view the world and you report on it. That's a journalist, right? And Gonzalo did that, and he did it for the Duran. As far as I know, that was his main outlet. And the people of the Duran always stood by him. They always believed he was the real deal. And that means a lot to me. He was an American. He was a Chilean American. He had dual citizenship from Chile and the United States. And I think the most disgraceful part about his death is that, from what I can tell from his father, who, advocated for him with the United States Embassy in Kiev, is that the U.S. Embassy did nothing for Gonzalo Lira, who was a citizen of the United States and a journalist. Those two things should have meant that he had protected status as far as the United States was concerned, and they did not treat him that way. They had many months to do something for him, and they did nothing. I mean, they didn't even help him get the medical attention he needed, much less get him out of jail for what was clearly speech-related offenses. I mean, the Ukrainians weren't even secretive about that. They were very honest about what they were doing. They put him in jail because he was spreading Russian pro-Putin propaganda. Well, I'm sorry, that is speech, and that's journalism, whether you like what he's saying or not. And people shouldn't go to jail for that, and they certainly shouldn't die in jail from that. And the fact that the U.S. did nothing to save his life is heartbreaking and should be denounced. Whatever you think about Gonzalo Lira, whatever you think about his political views, this is a tragedy. And, we're seeing journalists being hunted down. Let's face it. Look in Gaza. Depending on the numbers, I've seen anywhere from 86 to 120 journalists killed since October 7th. The most journalists killed, I believe, even ever that we know of. I believe even more than in World War II. I saw just today 9 journalists in Gaza were killed in one attack. 9. And then you have someone like Gonzalo Lira killed by the Ukrainian forces, which is under U.S. dominion, and the U.S. did nothing. So then when you have someone like Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, cry crocodile tears about journalists being killed, one has to be very angry by that kind of hypocrisy. He is a liar. Just as Biden and the rest of the administration lie about caring about civilians in Gaza, they're lying that they care about journalists. They are happy to see journalists who don't toe the line be killed. That's just a fact, and that needs to be denounced. So for that, I do feel sorrow for Gonzalo Lira. I feel sorrow for his father, who tried to save him. And I'll just say, without naming names, Stephen and I talked about this. We felt troubled that there were people who, from our perspective, who attacked Gonzalo Lira, accused him of maybe being an intelligence agent for the Ukrainians. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether that was true. And I don't know if we'll ever know that was true. But I always felt that should not have been publicly aired while he was in custody of the Ukrainians. I think it put his life in jeopardy based on assumptions that we can't prove and can't know, and that I don't abide by that. So I think that's that about Gonzalo Lira. I in the fullness of time, we'll know more about what happened. And, I feel sad about it. Now, in terms of the coup d'etats that you're talking about, the color revolutions, we continue to see these frequently. The most recent that I know of, and of course, there's no way I could possibly know of all of them, is the one in Pakistan against Imran Khan. Very shortly after he decided that Pakistan was not going to go with the West in sanctioning Russia. And shortly he met with Putin and made it clear that he was just not going to join the Western ranks in attacking Russia, economically or otherwise. And then all of a sudden, these alleged corruption charges are brought against him, even though Pakistan is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. The politics are very corrupt. He was probably the cleanest guy in all of Pakistan. And this was clearly, ginned up against him. And he was brought down very quickly. And very few folks in the Western press, raised any issue about it. And the kind of coup we saw against Imran Khan was what we call now lawfare. And this is a more kind of recent form of coup d'etat, where those supporting a coup, again, the U.S. tends to be the one that's behind these types of coups, works with the legal entities in other countries to accuse someone of corruption, usually, or some sort of misdeeds, and has them removed from power as a result. And so it has the markings of some sort of legal operation, when in fact it's just a coup, many times carried out by the military, but claiming to have the halo of legal justification. So there are a number of examples of that. Imran Khan, again, as far as I know, is the most recent example. In no particular order, you had the coup against Zelaya in Honduras in 2009. That was a so-called legal coup in which he ordered a referendum, which I guess may have allowed him to have extend his term in office, though that's not even clear. But in any case, he wanted to hold a popular referendum, in part on his social programs, progressive social programs that he was putting in place. And the legislature claimed, oh, that's illegal under the Constitution, that type of referendum, and you're acting illegally. And I remember NPR and other Western press saying, oh, that's terrible what he's doing, holding a referendum. What could be more terrible than asking the people what they want, right? And he was overthrown in a coup. And again, it was a military coup. The military kidnapped him in the middle of the night in his PJs, and they flew him in a helicopter out of the country. They exiled him, and he never came back to power. And we know from Hillary Clinton's hardback version of her book, Hard Choices, that she mentions in there, she orchestrated the situation so that he would never return to power. And then, of course, she was shocked that people were a little offended about her admission about behind meddling in other countries' internal affairs. And so in the paperback version of her book, Hard Choices, that paragraph is excised. But that is a classic case of a legal coup. We saw the same thing, of course, in Brazil, where Lula da Silva was sidelined in the 2018 election with corruption charges. That allowed Bolsonaro, the right-wing Bolsonaro, to come to power. The charges against Lula would ultimately be, all of them be dropped. And of course, he later ran for president and won, but it did allow for the right wing to come to power, and they did a lot of damage in the meantime to the indigenous population, to the labor movement, to the rainforest. And again, there's a number of examples of this. In Latin America, I think the most recent example I can think of is in Peru, where President Castillo was overthrown in a legal coup. Again, within like a year and a half of him even becoming president, they claimed he was involved in misdeeds, and they ousted him. He's in jail now. And his vice president came to power. She seemed to be bought off, and she has now moved the country in a right-wing direction. The day before, he was ousted again by the military, claiming to be exercising legal power. The U.S. ambassador, who had been a CIA, CIA operative, met with the military, clearly giving them the green light for this operation. So this we see over and over again. The more classic coup, and then I'll end my remarks, of course, and we see that as well often, is the type of coup that we can see going all the way back to the CIA's first coup in Iran in 1953 against Mohammad Mossadegh, the democratically elected prime minister. And in that circumstance, the CIA, and we know this now, for you can read the State Department's own history about this, it's not a secret. They paid people to protest violently on the streets of Tehran in order to provoke Mohammad Mossadegh's military to intervene violently against them, and then therefore to justify a coup, a military coup against him by a general that the U.S. had picked out to overthrow him. And the reason they picked this particular general is because he was a Nazi. That's true. And they thought that mean he was good politically. He'd never aligned with the Soviets since he was a Nazi. Okay. And ultimately, they convinced Mossadegh to violently put down these paid protesters by claiming that Americans were being hurt by the protest, right? And in Iran, of course, the worst thing you can say is that people, foreigners, guests are being mistreated, because this goes against the tradition of hospitality in a country like Iran. And Mossadegh felt he had to act. And of course, no good deed going unpunished, he was overthrown. Now, this type of coup has been replayed over and over again in Venezuela. Again, these paid protesters in Nicaragua in 2018. People paid to protest, to cause mayhem, to cause chaos, to try to overthrow, nationalist leaders, socialist leaders. And we see this time and again. And again, that playbook is just followed over and over since 1953. And that's pretty easy to see. Well, that's the end of my remarks. I hope that was helpful. And again, I would say Gonzalo Lira presente. And to his father in particular, I send my condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Unmute.
Appreciate your input.
I'd like to just make people aware of a book that Dan has just finished, and that is extremely timely. I mean, he's written on Ukraine. He's written on everything that's important to us as Green Renaissance, and his latest book is on Palestine. Could you maybe hold up a copy? Do you have one?
Yeah, I don't have a copy. It's going to print soon.
Okay.
It is called The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters and Why You Should Care, by Skyhorse Publishing. It will be out in March. You can pre-order it now, including on Amazon and from my publisher, skyhorsepublishing.com. I'm very excited about it. I just went to the West Bank in early December to do some research on the book. I hope it'll make a contribution to that particular issue. So thank you. And thanks, Gloria, for that.
Can you put it in the chat?
Yes,
those-
I will do. I'll do that right now.
That might be a little slow. Okay, so then moving
Yeah.
on.
And
Go ahead.
That was garbled. Can you say that again?
no, that's it. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Then moving on, our next speaker is Stephen Sefton, and Stephen Sefton is a journalist as well as a publisher of Tortilla Consal, and he is based in Nicaragua and has been involved in global affairs for many, many years. And when I'm confused, I ask Stephen what's going on. Thank you.
So thank you, Gloria, and thanks to everyone for giving me the chance to converse with you and offer my reflections on case of the very sad case of Gonzalo Lira. I'd like to offer my sincere condolences to his family and also his friends, especially the team at the Duran, who must have deeply felt his loss, or their loss of their close friend, Gonzalo Lira. And Dan is quite right to say that we were discussing Gonzalo Lira's plight over the last few months. And our conclusion was that from the outset, from the first time that the Ukrainian authorities arrested him, I think he was held for about 10 days and then released. But at that time, they should simply have deported him if they weren't happy with this foreign citizen on national territory saying things that they didn't like, and they just had to deport him. And now we've had this dreadful, horrible outcome of his death, a very cruel death in prison. So yeah, there are a couple of things that I'd like to try and cover in the 10 minutes that I've got. Firstly, I'd like to look at the context in which Gonzalo Lira died, because although the case was a shocking case, it's only one of thousands of people in Ukraine who have suffered at the hands of this odious, essentially Nazi regime. And Gloria was, as Gloria pointed out, there's this death list that's called the Myrotveret list, and that's been in operation since 2014. I was surprised to hear that, because I thought it had not been going for that long. But that's a sign that, from the very start, from the very origins of the Nazi regime in Kiev, or Nazi sympathizer regime, if you like, following the coup in Kiev in 2014, and they've been running this death list and in trying to intimidate people. And I think Dan's right that what they're trying to do is to suppress legitimate reporting. And so back in 2016, even then there were respectable organizations, credible organizations, were calculating that there were over 4,000 political prisoners in Ukraine, and that's only the ones that they knew about. And they're accompanying this policy, this regime policy of imprisoning people for their opinions. There was also a campaign linked to the Myrotveret death list, but not only to that list, of assassinations. Now, back in 2016, a local organization appealed to the Red Cross to try and get access to the prisons where they believed that these thousands of political prisoners were being held, and they feared that they were being abused and tortured. But the Red Cross tried to get access, and they were refused. So that is the context in which Gonzalo Lira was arrested and imprisoned. And so what I'm trying to say is that although obviously the case of Gonzalo Lira was a terrible case, a horrific case, he is only the most well-known, perhaps, for us outside Ukraine who live in the Americas, of thousands of people who've been detained, mistreated, abused and tortured by the regime's authorities. And that's also taking place in the context of attacks on the Orthodox Church and its faithful and its members and its priests, its hierarchy. I can't remember what the figure is now, but the last time I looked, I think a total of 12 opposition political parties had been suppressed by the Kiev regime. And this is a regime that we're asked to believe is defending Western democracy or Western style democracy on behalf of NATO against the Russian Federation. Now, it's just the lie is so deep and so profound and so in your face, but also so typical of the kind of regime change lies that, as Gloria pointed out, this massive misinformation, false information, psychological warfare offensive that is used as, and I think Dan also mentioned this, as an essential part of practically all the regime change operations that we've witnessed over the last 15, 20 years. And so part of this is also terror. And you can see this, and although, of course, in Ukraine, the regime change happened, what is it now, 9 years ago, something like that. But they're still using the same components, the same techniques that were part of their regime change operation. So you've got this massive misinformation, disinformation, psychological warfare campaign against both the people in Ukraine and principally the audience of the Western general public in the United States and Western Europe, North America, and also the rest of the world too. But the principal focus is that because of the monopoly power of corporate media, and also I think it's important to note that a lot of alternative media, NGOs, who alternative media that get their information from NGOs so that they can say that they're not aligned with any government, but that information is practically the same as the information you get from a NATO government anyway. And so you have this massive disinformation campaign that goes kind of hand in glove or hand in hand with the gruesome, systematic, comprehensive campaign of terror that is also used in most of these regime change operations. Although, as Danielle has pointed out, there's a variant on the regime change recipe now, which is the use of lawfare. But in the case that lawfare doesn't work, as it couldn't in Venezuela or here in Nicaragua, then the first resort is to terror. And so you have the horrible murders of Daria Dugin, the murder of that blogger Vladlen Tatarsky, and other victims of the Kiev regime. And so Gonzalo Lira's fate is very much part of that context, and I think to some extent we're at fault, or we have been at fault, for not paying more attention to the suffering of dissidents and political prisoners in Ukraine, and we only kind of become aware of it when a very high-profile figure like Gonzalo Lira suffers a similar fate. So In relation to that, I'd like to point out how hypocritical and cynical a lot of the what you might call civil society, if you like. I hate that phrase, but I mean, in the United States, are about the whole issue of human rights. I'm sure you're all well aware of this, but in this case of Gonzalo Lira, who's a very well established and very well known journalist and reporter, he was effectively abandoned. I haven't seen anything, for example, from an organization that I detest, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists in the United States. I haven't seen anything from them condemning what happened to Gonzalo Lira. And that just reminds me, and maybe I'm wrong about that, they might have made a statement. But I'm assuming that since I haven't seen one, they haven't. And that reminds me very much of the case of Nueva Radio Ya in Nicaragua, who a team that Gloria has met, and that team they were almost burnt to death by a mob of thugs in 2018, who were incited to do so by two very well-known journalists, including Miguel Mora. I've forgotten the name of his colleague, but Miguel Mora was actually awarded a prize by the Committee for the Protection of Journalists in the United States for his defense of journalism in Nicaragua. And so what you've got is, you've got these organizations, and I only mention the Committee for the Protection of Journalists because it's the I know best and detest most. They gave a prize to somebody who incited the murder of around 22 radio workers and journalists in Nueva Radio Ya. And these guys gave him a prize. Gloria knows these people. And if the Miguel Mora and his colleagues had got what they wanted, all those people, Gloria would never have met those people. They'd all have been dead. So that's I'd just like to offer that reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'd just like to add two things to what you and Dan have said. There were a lot of reports that Gonzalo Lira was being extorted and that he had paid something like $250,000 to get some kind of medical treatment or some kind of better services, and then they raised it to $500,000. And so he was not only, you know, subject to torture, but also extortion. And really, this Ukrainian regime are thugs. I mean, this is just, it's just hideous. It really is. And the other thing that I had read, and they do this in prisons in the United States. I've studied prisons in the United States quite a bit. Is when they want to torture someone and keep their hands clean, they'll put them in a cell with a known abuser. And then that person will beat them and rape them and do all kinds of horrible things. And they can just keep their hands clean and say, well, you know, we didn't do it. It was this other inmate that you know, stabbed them or, you know, blinded them or raped them. And that's another way that these things are done to really torture people. And one of the things that I had heard in regard to Gonzalo Lira is that they used toothpicks to scratch the whites of his eyes and said, you know, you can't see with one eye, can you? I mean, really horrific tortures. And this goes on not only in foreign prisons, but also in American prisons where we hold people incommunicado for years in solitary confinement. So I just wanted to, you know, add that element that, you know, our domestic prisons are also torture chambers, and political dissidents disappear and become incommunicado there too. And, a very famous one that was just released was Alex Saab. And he was subjected to all kinds of tortures and medical neglect. And medical neglect is another form of torture where they just say, oh, well, we just didn't have the resources, or we just didn't know, blah, 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 blah. But when I studied it is intentional. This neglect is intentional. Thank you. And I think we
Okay.
have Pasta has joined us, and Diane Sare, and we have Lou Wolf, and we have Jeremy Kuzmarov. Lou, Pasta,
Can I mention very briefly, Gloria? I'm reminded of the 1973 Chilean journalist who was the subject of the movie Missing, which had Jack Lemmon and Sally Field, about the murder of an American journalist at that time. Horman, I believe, was his name, during the coup in Chile. So speaking of Chilean journalists, very
His
quick.
name was
Okay,
Charles Horman.
take it away.
Is there a
Yes,
setting, Gloria,
okay,
you
yeah,
can put on
okay,
where we can
right.
see everybody?
yeah, well, right now we're on the setting, I think, where we see everyone.
No, because I'm not getting everybody. I'm only getting. It was
Okay.
moving from Stephen to somebody else now.
There was a spotlight on Stephen, and he never had his video on, and I just removed it.
Oh, okay.
So you got the setting on where everybody can see everybody now?
Yes.
Well, it's tricky. I think we're not spotlighting anybody. That's the better way to. That's what I understand.
Well, I think when people are making a presentation, it's best to spotlight them, like when Stephen was making a presentation. And if we go to, group speak, I think it's better to, pull back.
Okay.
So I just like to thank Stephen, for all the hard work he does. He does a lot of organizing as well as publishing and writing. And, I urge you to, check out a lot of his work that comes out in Tortilla Consal. And he's also written for the Gray Zone, and I submitted that article and many others that he does for other publications.
Oh, he's a troublemaker, and you know it. Where's he at? You're a troublemaker, Stephen.
We are joined with
Still there?
by Craig Pasta Jardula from Pasta to Go, the Convo Couch, co-host of Jimmy Dore, co-host of Kim Iverson. The man about town.
Making the rounds. I was the co-host of AM Wake Up. You did mention that I was the co-host of Convo Couch. That's the first time I got to speak to Gonzalo Lira, excuse me. And I didn't know a ton about him, but I'd seen him on the Duran, and Fee had reached out to him, and I couldn't wait to have him on. It was right in the thick of things when the military operation for the Russians just got started. So getting to hear his opinions while things were going on were crazy. But then, very interestingly enough, and something I like to bring to the table when we're talking about Gonzalo, because I think, now that he is no longer with us, and it's such a shame, there was this other kind of wise ass, snappy side. And he came on AM Wake Up a couple times. He would just reach out to me or Steve. AM Wake Up was another show I did in the mornings when I lived in Vegas for a year. And it was a little bit more raw and edgier, and had a little bit more truthers, people from the truther community, which might be known as this conspiracy theory community for some of you guys here. The 9/11 truthers, and people who are really up on, COVID and the fourth industrial revolution and the Great Reset and stuff like that. But it was much more edgier and raw in the mornings. And Gonzalo just would reach out to us. It's like, I'm pissed off. I got something to say, right? So he'd come on. We'd always talk Ukraine. But then we would just shoot the shit like just human beings. And, I got to know that other side of Gonzalo. And then, of course, I never really knew his opinions about, the Chile regime until I saw some of his videos, too, as well. And that was interesting, because a lot of people would also bag on him because of his beliefs. I mean, he was actually, I would say, somewhat sympathetic to the Pinochet regime. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if he was necessarily sympathetic to it, but he always wanted to prove that it's a lot different than what a lot of people on the left thought it was, I don't know what that means necessarily. You know, I don't think I would really want to live under the Pinochet government. But I mean, it was interesting from hearing his takes about that growing up as a young man over there. And that was just something special about Gonzalo. I do like the fact that, you know, just recently I was able to go on Kim Iverson, and it's amazing. You know, I was so blessed to be able to do Jimmy's show for several months, and now Kim's show for a couple days. And, you know, I can do it from my house now. We got the whole setup going. But the way Kim, you know, sounded off for Gonzalo, she got a call from his father and was told exactly what was going on because she had a relationship with Gonzalo and his father. You know, I mean, I don't know. Somebody was asking me tonight, well, what do you consider yourself? Your mom says you're a journalist. I'm like, I don't know. Journalist, commentator, political analyst. I really don't write a lot. You know, I'm not like a Dan Kovalik over there who can put out a book in like just 3 days and make these great articles. And my friend Gloria over there, I love her work. You know, that's how I fell in love with her the first time, and it's a great talent. But I think the way that Kim described Gonzalo, you know, as a YouTuber was really important because it wasn't a slander. It was about, you know, these are the vessels that a lot of us in independent media have to use, and we're going to make the best of it. You know, and he was a YouTuber. He was a great YouTuber. Any way you slice it up or dice it up, he was able to relate a lot of information that a lot of people couldn't get because of his geographical location and where he lived out to the masses. And I thought that was so important. Like I said, there will always be people who have beef with Gonzalo, but I guess I got to see that human side and that raw side, you know what I'm saying? That just, excuse my French, shooting the shit side. And for that, I definitely will be missed. And I just think he just did a hell of a great job in getting that information out there. And it was important. It was really important because just like any situation, just like what we're dealing with now with Israel and Palestine, where so many people are just misinformed, they don't understand anything, right? Like, oh, they'll yell October 7th, October 7th. I think a comedian said the other day, oh, you're watching this right in the middle of the 5th season. How cute. Yeah, I thought Joffrey was cool from Game of Thrones too, because I didn't watch it from the beginning. Unpacking that information is very important. I thought Gonzalo was very, very great at that too as well. As we were using every outlet we can to get this information out through hell or high water. So I think he made a great impact. I know he will be missed. And, you know, that's all I have to say. You know, I really will miss the personal side of Gonzalo, regardless of his you know, his ideology or his politics sometimes when it came to Chile or anywhere else, or how he felt about socialism or any of that stuff. It really doesn't bother me as much. I disagree, but I just love the human, as Bernie Sanders would say, side of Gonzalo Lira. And that's why it was important for me to come over here today and at least leave that behind.
Thank you.
Because that's what touched me most, that human side. Anyways, thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for
Okay,
stopping
thank you,
by.
Pastor.
have-
Judy wanted to get on very briefly. She
We
has her
also
hand
have,
up very briefly, I told her. And then we go to Jeremy.
okay.
Hello?
So very
Yeah.
briefly, Judy.
Can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear
Yes.
me? All right. So,
Take the spotlight off me.
yeah, I just,
Go very briefly.
I
Jeremy's next.
I just wanted to say
I'm trying.
about Gonzalo Lira. Well, he, actually, he was more than sympathetic to Pinochet. Gonzalo Lira is not the perfect hero for our cause. He was very much in favor of Pinochet, and he put down Allende tremendously. Not only that, but when he was Coach Red Pill, he used to have talks on things like don't ever date a woman over 25 and never date a single mother and things like that. So he was not a feminist, to say the least. But of course he didn't deserve his terrible fate. But at any rate, I had heard from the people in Russia that that even though he was from a fairly wealthy family and went to Dartmouth and had contacts in high places, the obstacle to his release was the Cookie Monster of Kiev, Victoria Nuland, and she apparently really hated him. So I just wanted to add that information.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Let's go to
Yeah.
Jeremy now. He's on because he has a time constraint. Thank you for your input.
Okay, well, yeah, this has been a very good discussion. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I don't, I mean, I don't have that much to add. I included in the chat an article. I mean, I've been covering, for a while now, yeah, this, Phoenix style program that the Ukrainian government has been adopting. I mean, yeah, it has been living in the twilight zone. Given you have this worship of Ukraine, that's I think still there. Particularly among liberal sectors, in academia. I mean, I recently attended a discussion where I live with this group. There's a foreign relations group in Tulsa, and you had this guy who's like a dean at Oklahoma University, State University, and he believes in the cause of Ukraine, and you really can't talk to him out of anything he believes. So I mean, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a population that's been, especially in the educated classes and the liberal and academia, who are wedded to Ukraine. And some of the people are involved with a lot of community activism when it comes to issues like prison complex. Or trying to promote liberal reforms, but they have taken on the cause of Ukraine, and they won't waver. I guess the facts just are oblivious to the reality, and it is like the Twilight Zone. I mean, the article I posted, discussed the murder of the former head of the Socialist Party of Ukraine in their parliament. Was hunted down and murdered mafia style. He was going for a walk in a park in Moscow. He had to flee to Moscow because his party is one of the banned parties, and he was murdered in cold blood, a mafia style hit in a park. Ilya Kiva, I believe, is his name, and that got almost no attention. Yeah, like Stephen was saying, these human rights groups are complete frauds. I mean, they've never shown any empathy for any of these victims in Ukraine over years now. I mean, this has been going on since the Maidan coup, and there have been countless victims. And I mean, it was reported in the Washington Post that the CIA was coordinating the SBU, special units that were involved in terrorist activity. I mean, they didn't really mince the words. In the Washington Post and New York Times has had articles about these terrorist units that carry out car bombings. It was reported in the New York Times, for instance, that they were murdering members of the parliament in the eastern Ukrainian province in the Donetsk People's Republic. That some of their leaders and members of the parliament were being murdered through terrorist acts. I mean, bombs placed in cafes, that kind of thing, that were thought to associate with Middle East terrorism. So, I mean, this is not really secret what they're doing. But yeah, these human rights groups and these liberals and these people in academia think this is the greatest regime and a great moral crusade. And the aid continues to that. I mean, it's really a terrorist regime that was installed. I mean, as Dan was mentioning the coup in Iran. I mean, we know the horrible history of the CIA and coups, and this is certainly high up there as one of the worst, I think, calamities that the CIA and U.S. has ever been involved with. And there's been really an anemic response on the so-called left, and that's, I guess, the purpose for Green Renaissance, given that the Green Party and a lot of people on the left were supporting Ukraine for a long time, and there's been anemic opposition. I mean, there's been much better opposition to the Israeli attack on Gaza. But there's still, and I think a lot of people in the Black Lives Matter movement have been silent. and the bloc left, because this is not a racial issue. This is just a pure human rights issue, and a extreme right-wing regime that was installed in Ukraine in a coup that banned 12 parties and has carried out a terrorist program with the CIA leadership. And there's been almost no opposition among progressives, and the bloc left has been completely silent on this. So, I mean, I think groups like Green Renaissance should adopt a universal standard of human rights. And these are, certain major human rights abuses. As far as the issue of color, and yeah, I mean, I've done some articles, so if people are interested, I can, retrieve other articles I've done or send it to them. As far as the issue of color revolutions, one, I think, a lot of these have been carried out recently in Eastern European countries as part of this goal of weakening and isolating Russia. I think has been a strong feature of U.S. foreign policy for years now. And I mean, one got and again, the left has not been attuned to this or mobilized to protest against these kind of policies. I mean, one that should be looked at is Belarus. There was Lukashenko is kind of universally demonized as this brutal dictator. But I mean, the World Bank, there's a book by Stuart Parker that offers a much better view of him. And the World Bank actually praised the Lukashenko government, which is a socialist government, and he resisted the privatization initiatives that most of Eastern Europe followed. The shock therapy that gutted, devastated the Russian economy, devastated a lot of Eastern European economies, and he resisted that, and he retained, state ownership of a lot of the major industry and retained the social safety net, and he resisted the World Bank in the attempt to impose austerity measures. And the World Bank, ironically, actually issued a report on Belarus praising the country because of its low inequality levels, which were lower than any other country in Europe under Lukashenko. And that's why, the color revolution of 2020 failed. The CIA was clearly behind that, and NED and other Western intelligence agencies, but it failed. I mean, a lot of the population was still supporting Lukashenko. And Georgia is another country where the CIA and NED are very active because they want, they're pushing NATO expansion in Ukraine and Georgia. They had, Saakashvili was kind of a neocon puppet that was in there in the early 2000s. And now you have the Georgia Dream Party, who's more pro-Russia. So I think they want to get, reinstall somebody like Saakashvili, who was supporting the Maidan coup also in Ukraine. He's a very shady guy who has links with the Bush administration and the neoconservatives and the Western intelligence apparatus. So I think, people should look at the manipulations in Eastern Europe and these countries. There should be more scrutiny and backlash among progressive forces. And yeah, I mean, there are, of course, other countries, Southeast Asia. I think it was mentioned, there are many places where the NED and color revolution apparatus is at work, whether it's Myanmar, Philippines. They're obviously supporting Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and they're using that to build up military bases to target China. So there are a lot of countries, but I would emphasize that people should pay attention to what's going on in Eastern Europe now, and Belarus and Georgia, and it's tied in with the U.S. strategy to undermine the nationalistic government in Russia and to try and isolate and weaken Russia. And it's a dirty game they're playing over there.
I just wanted to add one thing. In Ukraine, if you recall, there were African students and they were prohibited from leaving, and they really, really got shafted. It was very, very hard. There was even worse treatment for Africans in Ukraine.
Yeah, and that's never publicized anywhere. I mean, this is a terrorist regime that was installed. He's also destroying Ukraine's economy. He's imposing anti-labor legislation, and he's allowing U.S. corporations to start to take over. And they appointed, the Biden administration appointed Penny Pritzker, the corrupt banking dynasty and Obama patron, to head this reconstruction agency. And that's just going to open the floodgate for Western corporations. And Zelensky's is going to enable that. I mean, he's enabling the destruction of his economy beside the destruction of his own people. He's ruined a generation and confined to death a generation of his own people. And the New York Times, and you could read stuff critical now in the New York Times, although it's maybe spun a certain way, but the New York Times did report that they're press ganging, kidnapping people in Ukraine to send them to the front lines. And it's recognized that that's a suicide mission, that they're being sent to a certain death. And that's why Ukrainians are refusing to go, or they fled the country, so they have to kidnap people. And this is a government that's been heralded as this great democracy, and you have these pathetic academics and dean positions extolling this government and basically a new era of McCarthyism, destroying the career of any academic who dare question this kind of policy. As I was removed from one of these universities, so
Well,
these are.
It seems that under the we have Diane coming back in. It seems that under the Democratic Party, they advance in Russia, and then when we switch to the Republican Party, which is my prediction, then it kind of opens the floodgates to containing China. And one of these things that you're talking about is all of these techniques to try to box in Russia and to shrink them and make them lose their initiatives in other countries. And the Belt and Road Initiative is a very, very big thing throughout Southeast Asia and Asia. And this is now the new target. So this is extremely actionable because this is not really broken out as much. I mean, what's happened now in the former Soviet Union, the USSR, it's happened. But right now, the next stage is Southeast Asia. And that's where we're going to see, really actionable things. And that's where the CIA is really going to crack down on any counter narratives. So I think, really we should all keep a really good eye on Taiwan, on Thailand, on Laos, on Cambodia, on Myanmar, and what's going on.
Yeah, well, and who knows what
Wolf.
role the U.S. government may have played in the recent Taiwan election, because they just
were all over
reelected, this anti-China party, although it has a very small, it won by a minority of the vote, but it still won. And, who knows how much money the CIA and its related agencies was pouring in.
But they won by a percentage that was less than the last election.
Yeah, I mean they're clearly not very popular among the Taiwan population. They've also misgoverned their economy. They're basically these kind of governments relinquish the sovereignty over their own economy, and they sow disaster for their people in the long run. And that's what's happening in Taiwan as well as Ukraine. And there are a lot of Taiwanese that oppose this current government, but it was not enough to win the election. But
I just want to give Jeremy a minute to just pitch his book, and then we have Lou Wolf, who's going to speak about Laos, and Diane Sare. I'm not sure which one of you is more pressed for time. So Diane and Lou, are you there?
So I'm here, yes.
Okay, are you
let them
more
go.
pressed
Please
for
let
time,
them go
or
first.
or Diane? Okay, Diane, are you okay? Because Diane came in and now
Yes.
she's okay. So let's give Diane a chance. And we have a question by Dea. So Dea, would you like to ask the question and then we'll move to Diane?
No, it's not a question. I just wanted to respond a little bit to Jeremy. It was
Okay.
widely circulated, the treatment that African students receive by the by the Ukrainians when they were trying to evacuate. And in the same way, on Black Twitter, there's been a lot of traffic on the treatment of people who are detained in Russia. Like, for instance, what really got me was the treatment of Brittany Griner in Russia. So no, I don't pretend to be a Black leftist at all, but the abuses that we see that are happening to Black people in Russia and Ukraine, I would not anticipate any kind of sympathy for human abuses from those two countries. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, but my point is, I think that the Black left should be anti-imperialist. They've kind of lost that. If they're not questioning the U.S. policy. I mean, the Cold War is really a terrible. If you look at the original Cold War, I addressed this in my book, The Russians Are Coming Again. I mean, it was terrible for Black America because it diverted the country resources into a senseless arms race and away from programs that could help Black America as well as white America. But I mean, there should be more. I mean, coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement, I mean, in the 60s, you had the Black Panthers. That was really an anti-imperialist movement, and they, refused to serve in Vietnam, and they criticized U.S. imperialism. But you don't have that really among the Black Lives Matter. And Ukraine is an imperialistic war. The U.S. provoked that war. They have an imperialist agenda. They want to dominate the entire Eurasia region and weaken Russia. They see Russia as a potential rival for power, and they want to weaken its power so they can exploit the entire region economically and dominate it. And so they turn the Ukrainian people against the Russians, and they intervene in that country, impose a terrorist government, and it's threatening nuclear war. And it's diverting our resources into more militarism and away from programs of social and community uplift. And that's what Martin Luther King spoke about in his speech against the Vietnam War, how the U.S. government was a great purveyor of violence, and all the militarism deprived the people of the programs that needed, healthcare, education. And that's what Black America needs more than anyone, is a government and programs to assist their communities. So where are these voices of Black Lives Matter?
And I got you, Jeremy, but right before Christmas, I had 3 police departments draw guns on me because I had an RV. Okay, stuff like Ukraine, it's not really the priority in our community when we have to deal with things like that. You know what I mean?
I know. No, I know about that. That's obviously important. But I mean, King, the leader of the 60s did bring everything together, that the U.S. empire was connected, I mean, to the imperialistic, police forces. And I mean,
and that was while he was having, and me too, they wanted to sick dogs on me that day too. When all of that's going on, what you can really focus on is what's going on in your community at the time. Even Dr. King, I know he had speeches and he traveled, and in you guys' opinion, he was a world leader. But there is, I don't know what the system is that's repressing our communities in such a way that we don't hardly ever get a chance to create these gigantic platforms. Like I said, when small things like, I'm a 59-year-old woman that was stealing an RV at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Really? I mean, those kinds of things really repress the Black community into going into larger platforms, is all I'm saying.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dave. That's
It's not
important
just the Black,
information.
but it's also the white leftists who are so, I mean, I think rightfully focused on the issue like police brutality, but I think they should broaden their focus, and see that it's the same system that promotes repression at home that's provoking these overseas wars, and we need so maybe Green Renaissance can help lead the way and outreach in the Black community, and get just a broader platform, a broader movement against imperialism, against all the abuses of the current regime and system.
Okay, perhaps it's time to go to Lou now. We appreciate all your
Well,
input, Jeremy.
I think Lou ceded to Diane. I'm trying
Oh,
to,
okay, you're right.
I'm trying
You're right.
to spotlight Diane, and I was trying to spotlight Dea, and I'm having problems with my spotlighting. Let's see. Can anyone else please spotlight Diane?
Sure.
I'm having a hard time with the spotlight right now.
Is she muted?
No, you mean audio or video?
Yes, yes. Okay, she's
Yeah,
on.
yeah. Please put her on spotlight.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Yay, Diane.
Okay.
Thanks. Well, I mean, first of all, what happened to Gonzalo Lira was horrible. However, he was used. I do think that he was used in a certain way to monitor anyone within Ukraine, perhaps, who would have been opposed to what the government was doing. But you see the complicity of the United States in his death, if not even the kill list. And there's two. There's the Murat Furetz, and then there's the Center for Countering Disinformation, which, of course, as everyone knows, almost all of the government agencies and everything else right now is paid for in Ukraine by the United States. And they had a conference, which I think people from the U.S. Embassy, I don't know if our ambassador or press person was there, where they claimed that anyone who said anything bad about Ukraine was not only spreading disinformation or was a Russian propagandist, but was an information terrorist and should be tried for war crimes. But why do this? Is not a sign of a regime for which everything is going well. Why do we have the repression in the United States? And I would say perhaps the biggest problem in the world with these coups is that we had a coup. We had the assassination of President Kennedy, the Warren Commission cover-up, the assassination of Malcolm X, the assassination of Martin Luther King, and the assassination of Robert Kennedy, who likely would have been the next president. And that made it possible to plunge into Vietnam and also to massively shift the culture of the United States. And because the American people never really insisted on getting the truth about all those assassinations, in effect, the apparatus that did them has been running the United States. Now, there's a totally new dynamic in the world with this BRICS process, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt and Road Initiative, things that along the lines of what I and my association with LaRouche were fighting for decades, him since 1975. There's a totally new paradigm, and you see it when you hear certain African leaders speak, like the foreign minister of South Africa, Naledi Pandor, who is absolutely fearless. She doesn't act like a colonized person. They are playing their role in the world. They sent a delegation of 6 leaders from Africa to meet with Putin and Zelensky to help arrive at a negotiated end to that conflict. So I think part of the reason for the targeting of journalists, the silencing of truth, the incredible censorship that we are experiencing is that somehow the news of this incredible shift in the world is to be kept from the American people so that our criminally minded genocidal leaders can continue with their game. And I have to say, I don't think anybody takes the cake over what Tony Blinken had to say at Davos First, he talked about how really the whole point of Israel is that we have to create the conditions where we can unite all the Arab states with Israel against Iran. So it's just crazy geopolitics. It's insane. It's not going to work. I think Netanyahu might do well to consider what's happened to Zelensky and wonder what happens if he becomes expendable and how that's going to go. But then the other thing Tony Blinken said, and I sometimes I just can't believe this. He said, you know, everybody there wants the United States to be involved. They want our leadership. Virtually everyone I talk to, and I'm thinking, what, Micronesia, or who who are you talking to? So I'm not even sure all of the people involved are aware of how fragile their grip on anything is, not merely the narrative, but the whole economic system. And I think that if more Americans had the idea that actually a rotten old imperial system is coming to its end, we might begin to think really of what the future should be like. I mean, not just begging for crumbs, but we need an entirely new system. We need to put Wall Street and the Federal Reserve through bankruptcy reorganization. It's insane what we tolerate. How many hours do people have to work a week to be more in debt, as opposed to being able to pay your rent or your mortgage with 1 week's pay? So we've been putting up with a lot. The journalists help us to keep our moorings, and it's criminal their silence. The last thing I just want to say, you know, when the Ukraine, the Russian special military operation began, my husband and I found Gonzalo Lira, and we used to watch him all the time. It was just something I remember very vividly in those horrible days at the beginning of this, and the anxiety and wondering where it is. So I don't want to just sound Pollyanna-ish. I think it's very dangerous because of the arrogance and the delusion, but also our leaders have a lot less power than they think they do or what they want to portray. That's it.
Oops, am I on or not?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to thank Diane Sare, and we support Diane Sare for Senate. She's a peace activist, and certainly Christian Gillibrand is a warmonger. So, yay, Diane. Thank you for coming on today.
And she just got back from Israel. Oh, anyway, I don't even go.
Oh, God, no. Okay. Daya, did you have a few more things you wanted to say? Yeah, let's put Daya on Spotlight. And how do we okay, remove Spotlight. I got that to work. Okay. Daya, you're on Spotlight. I don't know how to do that. Can we put Daya on Spotlight?
Don't worry, I'm taking my frustrations out in the chat. I'm good.
You're okay? All right.
Yes, I am.
All right, so then we have Lou Wolf getting to the region of Lao. Let's put Lou on Spotlight.
Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Lou Wolf is a friend, and he also is one of the founders of Covert Action Quarterly, which had become Covert Action Magazine, and has been a good friend of Phil Agee. And if those of you who don't know Phil Agee, he was a former CIA officer, and he basically, went in, believing the American dream. And then when he saw what was really going on, he was compelled to speak the truth, even though it compromised his family life, it compromised his earnings, it compromised his safety. He was just compelled to tell the truth, and Lou has been with him from the beginning. And Lou is also just a wealth of information. So I'd like to turn this over to Lou. Wolf.
What up, Lou?
Thank you very much. This is quite a gathering tonight. It's amazing to hear what we've heard already. And I'm sorry I was late in getting in. I could say so much about Phil Abeji. I really, by accident almost, got to know him. I was living in London at the time, and I attended the first public speech he made after his book, his book, which was published in 14 languages and was a bestseller. His book, Inside the Company, on company business. So I attended the speech, the last public speech he made, or first public speech he ever made in Conway Hall in London. And there were thousands of people there. It was 3 levels. It was a huge gathering. Quite a number of them definitely were quite obviously CIA people who were there because they didn't believe that this man could stand up to the CIA as he did. So I walked down 3 flights and there he was. And I walked up and shook hands. Everybody wanted an autograph, selfies and so forth. And I said, Phil, I want to say to you, I'm amazed that you're still alive. Why they haven't killed you yet? And he looked at me sort of quizzically and said, did the CIA send you to get close to me? And 5 minutes later, we were comrades. And the CIA, we have documents proving that the CIA was going to assassinate him here in the United States, but they decided that the finger would point immediately at the CIA, and so they canned that operation. I had the luck, thanks to my experience in Laos, where I lived from 1964 to 67. I had refused to join the military. My parents had always taught me not to kill people. And I really bought that, hook, line, and sinker. And I refused to join the military. I said, I'm never going to put a gun on my belt and kill people who have no complaint or no efforts against me and people I know. It's very much like Malcolm X said the same thing, and Muhammad Ali said the same thing. So I ended up in Laos in October 1964, and somebody who was, and I went to work with a group called International Voluntary Services, IVS, which is no longer in existence. And we were building wells and water seal latrines and schools and medical clinics and so forth. And so my first 2 weeks in Laos, a tiny country, large in size, small in size, but large in very dramatically committed people who were the target of the most bombs, most ordnance has been dropped on Laos, even the UN says this, than any other country in the history of warfare. If you measure that in terms of per capita population at the time, which was estimated, the French never conducted a single census in Laos. Unlike in Vietnam, Vietnam was treated by the French rather better in the sense that they had more doctors and more schools. Laos, when I arrived there were 3 doctors in the entire country. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that Laos became a target of one of the largest, actually the largest CIA paramilitary operation before what happened in the 60s and 70s in Iran and the Philippines and in Latin America. And so I want you to understand that Laos still has people dying from ordnance, unexploded ordnance. They're called UXOs, which is still in the soil, thousands of them across Laos, particularly in northern and eastern Laos, which is near the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And that was why the CIA was bombing there, or one of the reasons. Laos had no natural resources other than teak wood. That is the only export from Laos, still today. And so I guess the point I want to make here is that Laos was a laboratory, an early laboratory. There are others that followed for CIA operations. And so I want you to understand that I have learned about CIA, not from ever having a clearance. I never worked for the government. I never would. But because, and I've learned from other CIA people, in addition to Phil Agee, John Stockwell, Ralph McGehee, John Kiriakou today, John Kiriakou, who's a very courageous whistleblower, who is actually on the board of CovertAction Magazine and writes for us. And I've learned from each of them and others that the CIA, in its covert operations, its paramilitary operations, which I should really stress, the CIA clandestine service, as it's called, that's the dirty side, or the dirtiest side of the CIA, they will repeat after time after time after time the same operation, but they adjust it, they tweak it in different places in different time periods. And that includes the operations that we've been talking about tonight. And so that's really important for people to understand. The other thing I want to respond, if I may, to is Dea, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I hope I am. That I'm white, and I have been very active in support of liberation movements worldwide, but also here in the United States. We are looking at a headlong slide into fascism in this country. And I happen to be in touch, for example, I happen to be in touch with a man right now. He called tonight, called my home. He's a man who's been a black man and been in prison for 44 years on death row in San Quentin in California, San Quentin Prison, California, which he refers to as a hellhole. He wrote an article recently for CovertAction Magazine about San Quentin, and I invite you all to check it out. And James, his name is James P. Anderson. You can look him up. He's an artist. He paints. He also carves pendants, which you can wear around your neck, and he'll personalize them for you if you want, with your date of birth, with your. He even does the Palestinian flag on them, the Cuban flag, and so forth. But he has kept his sanity through 44 years in San Quentin. And I should point out also, there's a man a week from tonight who is scheduled to be executed by lethal injection with an experimental drug. And there are dozens of people. James is far from the only innocent person on death rows in this country. Certainly the Angola prison in Louisiana is another example. And there are many others. The point is that the military industrial prison complex is alive and well, and Joe Biden, in my view, will be long after I'm gone, and most of us will be thereafter. He will be that historians will write one day that he was the worst president we've ever had. And surely we've had many bad ones. And Trump is only a Boy Scout compared to, in many ways, compared to what Joe Biden is about. He's a world-class war criminal. He's always been and always will be. That's enough. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Impressive demonstration of eloquence and historical memory, Lou. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just took a moment to plug Jeremy's book that it says I'm going to finally get it. I purchased it on November 18th. and I'm supposed to get it between January 25th and 27th. It's called Warmonger: How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Launched the U.S. Trajectory from Bush 2 to Biden. And you can get it on Amazon. And should we open this up to, I think we've gotten everybody that is a speaker. Do you want to take some questions? I see Chuck has his hand up. I'm going to take it off the spotlight, and this is like an open to everyone. Okay, Chuck.
Well, I want to acknowledge Diane and your recitation of the crimes of the 60s. And, Hugh Esco talks about the 63 coup. And so I'm interested in, and Jeremy talked about the possibilities of MLK. And so I think there's a criticism in our movement for history that's been stolen from us. If those people had lived, not been killed, society would be very different. And so there's the stolen history. And so I just wanted to say that because I think that's an important argument for us to make. And it's the Green Liberty is about accountability, transparency, and protect, and for whistleblowers to fight back against the corruption of our rotten state. So I think I just want to acknowledge that. That's what I wanted to say. And I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chuck.
I just
Who
want to
else would
say
like to speak?
something. I just want to say something quick. Daya has a hand up, but I just wanted to say Chuck is kind of our brother or sister
Go ahead, Gloria.
organization. Chuck is our sister or brother organization. He's the key organizer for I'm losing my mind, the Green Liberty Caucus, and we work very closely with them. Green Renaissance is kind of a think tank, and we focus on many different issues. Chuck focuses mostly on state crimes and government crimes. So we look forward to Chuck's input always.
Yeah, let me just close. Yeah, thank you, Gloria. Let me just close with I'm operating on a theory that the Green Party could grow its ranks if it called out the big lies, the historic big lies, and demanded justice for these horrible state crimes. I mean, it's a theory. I mean, it's a great conversation piece. It's a sledgehammer on cognitive dissonance. It makes people uncomfortable, but at least it's something we can feel good about as we, try to make the world a better place. So I think it's a lever point or a fulcrum. I don't know which one, but okay, Chuck out.
We have Daya's hand up.
Thank you, Gloria. Let me lower my hand before I forget. I am always just totally, and here comes the Native people thing. I'm just always so perplexed when I come into these spaces, and there's always these quotes and this lauding for dead Black people, but the alive Black people don't seem to get any kind of well, okay, let's keep you alive, he's dead kind of approach. The thing to me is, the Zionism, we as Black people in my generation experience that every time, someone like Kanye West or what's the basketball player's name? Kyrie Irving get blackballed and called anti-Semitic. So today, it's a big damn deal. But back then, oh, you're anti-Semitic, you're anti-Semitic. What in the heck has changed? Now that white people are experiencing it, what has changed? I wish somebody would really explain that to me. I mean, seriously, I want some white people to tell me why it is so okay to quote Dr. Martin Luther King when you don't give an F about Black people today.
Well, of course we do, Dea. I don't know where that's coming from. Of course we do.
So where is the anti-Black crime bills and things that the Asians have? Where is that at? You know, if everybody was out there protesting for George Floyd, we never did. You know, that was something I feel like every Black person in this country should not even go to the polls because there is nobody to vote for. When Biden promised an anti-hate crime bill for Black Americans, and he and his vice president I mean, they have offered our group nothing. And then the Native Americans, they have a Bureau of Indian Affairs. We can't, all we're getting is studies for reparations. We can't even get a Freedmen's Bureau. Do you know that there's money in a Freedmen Bank that Janet Yellen brags about that is going to BIPOC communities? And if you don't know what a BIPOC community is, it's Black, Indigenous people of color. How many Black people you think are going to get any of that once you start spreading it out to all these other people? There is nothing, but still, and I got that. If you don't want to give anything to Black people, stop quoting Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass. Stop it. It's hypocrisy at its worst instance for someone like me to sit there and listen to this, y'all. And then to call out, you know, Black groups and why aren't they interested in fascism? We've been dealing with fascism for over 400 years. And yes, if fascism had been fixed then, we would not be dealing with it now. So the sooner you guys fix this, the sooner you start treating everybody equal, the sooner you're going to get somewhere. But if you're still overlooking all the disparity going on with other communities, yes, Native Americans are in a more disparate situation than white Americans. They need their land back. We need our land back, okay? We need to stop being redlined. We need to stop being abused in our communities. And then, maybe then we can look at human rights abuses in Ukraine. I'm sorry, but I either need to stop coming in these spaces, or people have to stop being hypocritical. If you're going to quote Martin Luther King, quote him for the Black man he was, not just because it's a good quote.
Hey, so can I interrupt, Dea? I think it's important for us to appeal to the intentions of people in the past who were killed. That's what I'm doing. Martin Luther King represented a possibility. All those guys represented possibilities. Appealing to that lost, stolen history is a legitimate thing for me to do in making an argument and an appeal to building a movement for accountability.
So are you interested in defunding the militarization of people who lived in Atlanta, his community?
I'm for John Spritzler's egalitarian revolution. I think that's fundamentally what we need. That's where I accept that.
And see, that's the Christian thing, because Christians, and I'm a Christian, are always wanting to be of service in the way that they want to be of service. But like I said, Martin Luther King, I think he was born and raised in Atlanta. One of the biggest cop cities in the world is being built right down the street from his birth home. And I've got all of these white people running around quoting Martin Luther King, and nobody cares that they are totally militarizing that city. But you want to give them what you, and you know, Chuck, you know I love you, so we're not arguing. But you want to give them what you want to give them.
There's a big opposition movement to cop cities, and it's Black and white.
course it is. It's black and white because everything's black and white. Everything that gets done to us eventually gets done to you if you haven't figured it out. Okay? That's what I've been trying to tell people for the longest. You can keep treating us bad if you want to. That's on you because it's coming back to you. And that's where I think this cup, yeah. I was in the military. I thought I was serving my country, and to find out we were protecting oil wells. I got it back then, back in the 80s. And now some of these people are just now figuring that out 30 years later. But I could have told you then. If you really want to listen to these people that you're quoting, listen to the whole story, listen to their real story, everything they went through. So that, yeah, nobody has to suffer what they went through. But you giving them what you want to give them is not the same as giving them what they need, Chuck. Love you to death, but it's just not.
Well, I understand that you're speaking in the immediate reality of your direct experience, and you remain in an, I get it. I absolutely get that. So we work on multiple levels simultaneously is what we do. So all that I've represented is a kind of a complaint that, you know, we got ripped off, and we ought to complain about that. And as part of a rhetoric of building a movement for accountability. That's all that I've represented. I'm not, I love, so that's all, Dea. I think we should probably go on to someone else, and unless you have a final.
Trayvon, do you want to add something, or Bernadine?
And Lewis has his hand up.
I think this was one of the problems in the Green Party. It was like the people would, during the coup in the Green Party that I went through, the issue was racial. What was the issues that we made exciting, right? The Green Party wasn't, we started making it about reparations, police accountability, and the party was we were gaining traction, and people were getting interested. And then even during that election, if you look at the polls, so what Dia said, you can't force things on people. You got to give the people what they want. So if you looked at the polls from the 2020 elections, most people said their concerns was the economy and race relations. And that was because of the work that we were able to do, like educate people about the economy and race and reparations, and making reparations an issue in the 2020 elections. It's going to be an issue. It's an issue now in the 2024 elections. Even if you listen to Biden's speech at the church, he talked about the racial wealth gap and lied and said that it's been the lowest in years. But the fact that he's even talking about the racial wealth gap comes from the work of reparations activists and others who are focusing on those type of issues. So if we're able to make an electorate excited about an issue, but then the rest of the party says, well, I want to talk about the monetary system, or just some, just some stuff that people are not really thinking about, or is not forefront in their mind, like the economy, that even still right now, people are going to be concerned about the economy, especially Black people who are suffering the racial wealth gap. And like Dia said, it's hurting us now, but eventually it starts to hemorrhage and other people suffer it. We like said, so that's all. I understand where her frustration is coming from. And then the Green Renaissance is actually like, I want to win. You know what I'm saying? I want to be on a team that wins. I don't want to be a loser, or I don't just want to play just to lose. I remember the Vikings used to just always lose, or the Bears would always just lose. You're like, oh, and that's just winning it energizes you. It energizes the people that are working on your issues and your causes. So I think we need to win, and for the Green Party to win, or for the independent parties to win, you have to talk about issues that Americans are concerned about. And at 2020, those issues were the economy and race relations. But there was, so that's just all I'm saying. And we want to win elections. So
not only election, we want to
If
win
I
the
could
big
just make
the
one
whole
brief
thing.
point.
Yeah.
Lou is, yeah, I think we're all with you on that. We all want to win and get out of this ridiculous, oppressive system. Lou has his hand up. Can we go to Lou now?
A couple of things I'll add here, and I respect you, Dan, for what you've been saying. I will point out that 1 mile from where I sit now here in Washington, D.C., there's a cemetery, a black cemetery, where former slaves, over 200 people, including former slaves and their descendants, were buried. And a developer here in Washington decided, we don't need that cemetery anymore. A man who's running for the Senate right now was said to one of our members of our coalition, Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, said, nobody cares about that cemetery. His name is David Trone, Trone. It happens that David Trone's brother worked his whole adult life for the CIA. So I guess birds of a feather are flying together today. My point would be that maybe many people don't know, I'm sure most do in this meeting know, that Jesse Jackson was part of the assassination of Martin Luther King. I say that because he helped Jesse Jackson, or he directed the room in the hotel in Memphis to be changed to the top floor. And when Martin was taking a rest on his bed, Jesse walked in, and this is documented. Jesse walked into the room and said, Martin, you should go out, put on a tie, and go out on the balcony and wave to the crowd. And that was part of a pre-planned demonstration, pre-planned operation, because as it was said at the time by himself, by Jesse, white people don't know the difference between the niggers. He used the N-word. Jesse did. And so Martin walked out, put a tie on and walked out there, and he was shot. It was an operation. All the police were removed from the site. You know the story. So the other part is that people don't understand that, the history of racism in this country is very, very real, even today, as I pointed out with the cemetery here. And if we're going to, and I'm supporting very much what Chuck was saying, that we have to build a movement which is multicolored, okay? Black and white and brown together. So that's what I'm part of. Thank you.
Yeah, and my point, can I add a point? Oh, my point was that the left-wing or activist movement should connect the domestic problem and injustice with the imperialistic foreign policy, and how that contributes to huge inequality and injustice. And there should be more mobilization against the U.S. policy in Ukraine, not just because of the human rights abuse, which is one thing. There should be universal concern, especially among groups that have faced terrible human rights abuse, but also because this new Cold War and this imperialist foreign policy is going to just fuel greater inequality. It's going to divert all our resources into a futile and senseless arms race that could culminate in nuclear war, and that's taking the money from where we need it, in their schools, in a healthcare system for everybody. So I think these activist groups should all mobilize around, a universal condemnation of this kind of aggressive imperialistic foreign policy. And that's what Martin Luther King and other great Black leaders of the past recognized that. So that was my point. It's not, I'm supporting the Black rights movement, absolutely.
And I hear you, Jeremy, but again, I just don't believe you know all of what Dr. Martin Luther King tried to get done in this country and what was most important to him. I do know, because he was recognized globally, he probably spoke a lot about global issues. But yet again, like I said, if you can't save your own grandchildren, what is the use? Because that's where Black folk are right now. And to my point, and like I said, I'm 59 years old. I was alive when Dr. Martin Luther King was alive. I think it's worse now, Jeremy. On the ground, the racism, the Klan-like approach to people, it's, you know, I would think, and I'm, like I said, 59 years ago, about 10 years ago, I didn't think I'd ever hear a white person use the N-word in a conversation that I was in. And it was probably because if I was in the room, we'd probably be swinging at each other right now. But you could do that on a Zoom. I got that. But that's just disrespectful. So we would love to be able to fight on equal terms and level with everybody else for all the injustices. But as long as people are calling us N-words in a meeting, there is nothing for us to stand side by side to fight on. We have to deal with that first.
I think Lou was quoting
Jesse Jackson.
Yeah, he was quoting Jesse Jackson. He wasn't speaking on his own behalf.
But I'm gonna say it here, and I'm gonna say it here. You can't do that, okay? You can't do that. You can't sneak in the N-word because you're quoting somebody. You just can't. It's a disrespectful word. We all know what it means. You know, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. We don't want to hear it. Now the kids today rap about it, and that may be what they want to do, but it's not cool. To quote nobody, you can say the N-word, you can say, but no, it's not appropriate. So I'll just say that. I understand.
We heard you, and we understand. And I just want to say, I've written 2 articles on the prison system, and they were published by Lou and by Jeremy. And, you know, basically what I wrote about was how the prison system is modern day slavery. And how, because of certain changes in mandatory prison sentencing and the war on drugs, from the 1970s to now, the prison population has increased 700%. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that, you know, what goes on in our prisons and what goes on in foreign prisons are interrelated and something that we cannot separate. And you know, I think a lot of us get that here, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention even more, because I think it's, you know, very important. And one thing I'd like to ask,
Gloria, can I jump in?
wait, I just wanted to ask Trahan to talk a little bit about reparations and what he's achieved with Black Lives Matter, because you know, it just a small thing, but you know, just a small diversion from what our main topic. But I think, you know, Trahan's accomplishments are really important. And you know, I would like to highlight them. And also I know that Milana's had her hand up for a long time. So Alana, would you like to speak, and then give Trahan the floor so that he can speak?
Yeah, I'll just maybe even begin a conversation just to say that the conversation so far is a very excellent and astute analysis, certainly on U.S. foreign policy. I think where we go with what Dia's plea is that we really get clear on internal colonialism. She's the only one here that's mentioned the land problem. She says we got to have our land back. Well, Black people hardly ever had any land. The Civil War afterwards was supposed to have land reform for the South. That got curtailed. And now people are trapped in impoverished zones like Baltimore and so on without employment. And the land is increasingly grabbed by absentees, BlackRock, investment corporations. And so the squeeze is on. I don't know where I'd like to know where Dee lives, what city you live in, because we can look at each of these cities and see that the stranglehold is happening. And of course, it's worse in the Black communities. So
I'm gonna spot Tulsa, Oklahoma, Alana. Okay.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I have family from the Greenwood Avenue area. That area had 20 oil wells on it before they bombed it and burned it to the ground. It has been determined that land is owed back to the descendants. They will not give it back. There are lots of Cherokee, Chickasaw, Creek freedmen in Oklahoma and Texas. I live in Texas, but I grew up in Oklahoma. We want our land. Yes, there's lots of land.
Yeah, I live in Tulsa.
Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, the Black Seminole want their land back. Georgia, there's land that was taken. And this was not land that was given. This was land that was purchased by, that was taken illegally. There's property that has been taken. Lana, we can talk for a day or two on lots of land. That needs to be.
I would love to have a really big conversation on this. I just watched Killers of the Flower Moon about the land, the native land that they discovered oil wells in Oklahoma. And then they ended up killing a lot of the women. And that's a great documentary movie you all should really see. But Dia, if you want to work with me to bring forward the land problem and the land rights issues, that's exactly what I've been working on for 40 years. And I'm working on it both with the direct land rights access, with earth as a birthright of all people, not by buying and selling, but by right. That everybody should have a right to the earth, the place to stand as a birthright. And also, there's a very little mention, but I think Jeremy just mentioned the resources are going to the wrong places rather than to serve the people. What are those resources? Those are our public finance resources. Those are our tax dollars. We're not going to just say, hey, don't pay into the military. Please just give it to we the people. It's got to be a big, deeper dive into taxation policy, because that is the ability to create or destroy us. And the Green Party had a very clear, I've got a document I sent out a few times to some of you. Haven't gotten anybody really seriously look at it, but there's Green Party platforms in many countries that have the importance of the tax shift, to take taxes off of people who work and labor and production and onto this unearned income that accrues to the base, the land and resource base. That should not be privatized. So that's what I'm working for. I'd love the opportunity to go a little deeper dive into that, but maybe it could start with a conversation with Dee and I at some point, and others who are interested. And I think maybe Traron would find this of great interest too, since he's been with the Green Party a long time, it seems. So that's how I'm getting a little word in edgewise. Thank you. Let's focus on the land, basic person-planet relationship, of the relationship of we the people to our earth itself, and that our democracy was never set up on any kind of economic or earth rights democracy. We need a new form of democracy overall, and we can do that. And I'd like to have conversations like this in future, focus on projects we're working together for the change that we agree that we need, and less time on analysis, even though our analysis is excellent. It's actually good enough. It's now time for what do we do about it. So you wanted to go on to Jeremy, I think.
No, I wanted to go on to Traherne.
Oh, Traherne.
And then I promised to host a meeting on land rights.
Fantastic.
Awesome. I'll be real quick. I just first I just want to say that black farmers, just black farmers, lost $326 billion worth of land, about, according to John Deere, or about 19 million acres, or 90% of our land was lost. About 14% of the farmers were black. Now we're dealing with like food deserts and stuff like that, and health disparities, and so and then we just had a huge, it was really cold this weekend up here in Minnesota, but we still had our MLK solidarity rally, and we had it was about 6 blocks of cars. So we had to stay in cars because it was so cold. And I was speaking and my mouth even started freezing up. But we were in solidarity with in solidarity with MLK, who did talk about reparations. And also we were in solidarity with Stop Endless Wars and a Free Palestine. And so that was a really great rally. But with BL, even when I was the chair of the Green Party, I was also, and I'm still the co-founder of BLM Minnesota and the lead organizer. And we were able to get, when George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin, we were able to get Chauvin arrested like immediately. And that had never happened here in Minnesota. And I don't think a white officer had ever been arrested for killing a black person in Minnesota. And I think that was one of the first times. I know Muhammad Noor, and we even were active on that, was arrested for killing Justine Damam, but he was Somalian. So Derek Chauvin, that was and then the BLM movement, which the racial reckoning was started by our chapter. And so when George Floyd was murdered, we were able to activate, but because we have been such an active chapter in the past with Philando Castile, Cordell Handy, just a lot of people who were killed by the police up here. So we know that the police, we call it the art of the cover-up. It's like a manual. When they murder black people, they go to a certain playbook. So we had to start creating a way to respond to the art of the cover-up. And so the BLM, those protests were the biggest protest movement in American history. And then they started to spread to different countries. And then even the reparations movement started to spread to different countries, like the UK and London. I was able to do joint articles with other Greens overseas, like in Wales.
Trahern, for those in the audience, because we're recording this, that might not be familiar with reparations, could you just outline it in one sentence?
So reparations are payments for harm that has been caused by a people, or restitution. For the United Nations, the 5 principles of reparations are guarantees of non-repetition or cessation, restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, and satisfaction. So basically, like if somebody hits you with a car, that person is responsible for repairing your car and repairing the damages. Slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, police brutality, employment discrimination, housing discrimination damaged the black community. And that's why right now we have a racial wealth gap where whites have $100 trillion, over $100 trillion worth of wealth, and blacks have about $3 trillion worth of wealth. And not because we're dumb, not because we're stupid, not because we're lazy, but because of racist policies. According to Demos, the racial wealth gap is substantial and is driven by public policy decisions, and public policy decisions are made by lawmakers. So that's what reparations is, and it's not just about direct cash payments. It's also about system change, and I think that's kind of the conversation we're having tonight. But we also want to talk about system change within like our police department, within our housing, within our real estate, within employment decisions, how employment decisions are made, things like that that impact Black people's lives. So we here in St.
Absolutely.
Paul, we were able to, and I was able to work with. I wrote an ordinance for reparations, and then when I got elected to be the chair of the Green Party of the United States reparations working group, it was to pass HR 40, but because we were grassroots and we believe in the bottom up, I said, well, let me start at the local level and work our way up. And then I did a couple presentations. One of the city council people came to the presentation. She really liked it. But I knew that we shouldn't just go straight to city council with the ordinance. So we started doing like a book club, which actually we have a book club meeting coming up on the 23rd, which will have, so she liked it. And then we started a book club meeting and we started educating people in the community about it. We got all the Black businesses in the area to sign on to a letter of support. And then while we were doing that, COVID-19 happened. The New England Journal of Medicine said that if reparations were in place when COVID-19 had happened, that the Black community wouldn't have suffered the way it was. Then George Floyd happened, and then it was kind of just a no-brainer. And then that gave us also, because we were leading on the George Floyd issue, that also gave us a worldwide platform to talk about reparations too. And then so our bill passed 7-0 each time, was co-authored by all our city council members, but Council Member Jane Prince was spearheading it. And then so right now we're ranked second in the nation as far as reparations legislation, according to the African American Redress Network. And I think it's because a lot of the other so we were one of the first of a handful, like Evanston passed theirs. Evanston's was the first. Then after Evanston, I think we were not too far after them. Now there's 115 of them. And a lot of those people call and talk to us and look to us for advice on just how to get their commissions up and running and things like that. So, but that was work that did start independently and had started out of the Green Party. And now it's went from like just 2 or 3 reparations commissions to now there's 115 across the nation. And New York had just passed theirs too a couple weeks ago. So now there are actual states like California, Illinois, and now New York. And hopefully Minnesota, we have another bill called the Minnesota Migration Act, and it's called the Migration Act because Black people migrated from the South to the North to find a better life, but still found white supremacy and institutional racism. And also, Dred Scott was enslaved here in the Minnesota territory. And Minnesota was actually established by a lot of slave owners from the South, like Aiken, a governor from South Carolina who came up here and gave the University of Minnesota a loan when they were going through hard times. Joseph Sylvanus Lowry, a slave owner from Kentucky, came up and established the city of St. Cloud. He also had a newspaper called the Union newspaper, and that newspaper is still around, but it's called the St. Cloud Times. So we got a street here named Iglehart. He's a slave owner. So there's just the foundations of Minnesota are built off slavery, even though slavery wasn't supposedly legal here. But yeah, we were able to get a lot of work done as far as reparations, and even here, it's had an impact on the United States. Actually, I just was in Evanston for a reparations symposium, and that's when they announced. Like I'm sitting in the crowd, and they're like, "Minnesota's second in the nation." I'm looked at the person next to me. I'm like, "Are they talking about us?" And they were like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh wow, okay." So, yep. So we're going to continue to lead. I think ours is different because a lot of the other reparations, and I'll land my plane here. They're like task force, but ours is a permanent part of St. Paul's government. And so like there's like term limits and things like that. But I'll land there. Thank you, Gloria. And thank you all for
Thank you.
being on
Thank
this
you
call.
all. I think Chuck has his hand up. Chuck,
Yeah,
did you
thank
want to?
you. I have my hand up, and I just want to circle back to Jeremy's. You know, I really like Jeremy's analysis, and I think that, you know, if any Green or anyone who runs for president should have Jeremy as a close advisor on international affairs and advancing a better society. So, and I think I want to circle back to the movement building and the language we use around what we're about. And it's quite amazing, you know, with Diane, I think she's left. But this appeal to the lost possibilities and the stolen history. Oliver Stone touches on it in his kind of, when he talks about, you know, stuff, and then James Douglas in JFK and The Unspeakable, he speaks to that these idea of lost possibilities. And this is an existential claim that we've been ripped off. And I just want to emphasize that. And I want to emphasize that we be mindful of movement building. And so I'm, you know, that's what I'm interested in. And I'll close with this. I think a truth politics, and that's why I liked Emmanuel. I like Emmanuel. He embraces truth politics, and Cynthia McKinney made an appeal to the Lawyers Committee on the anniversary of 9/11. And she said the lawyers on this committee doing that work are the natural leaders for, I guess we could say, electoral possibilities, but anybody who runs for office who's a truther would be doing it like Diane, I suppose, as to speak truth to power and to call out the big lies and drive the sledgehammer against the collective cognitive dissonance. But we have to sing to our choir, and that's where we have to grow our ranks. And I just want to close with that I appreciate that element. So thank you, Jeremy. I'm really grateful you're participating here.
And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and I'd like to, you know, especially I'd like to thank our speakers, and it's a bit late and I'm a little sleepy. So I think we should
You should end the recording.
end the recording. So anyway, good night, everyone, and we'll work on a few things. I do want to work on Radio Ya that was bombed in Nicaragua, because I'm now a co-chair in WBAI, and you know what happens the same way in the Black community. What happens in the Black community happens in the white community. Also, what happens in the developing world happens in the you know major industrial world. So you know, when they start blowing up radio stations, it means something. I think Lou has his hand up also, so maybe Lou will close. And also, I think land rights are very important, and I think Alana's been really wanting to have a meeting on that, and I really see it all kind of coming together at this point with some of the work that you know Dea and Trey Hearn are doing. So that'll also be coming up. Thank you. Lou, you have your hand up.
I'll just mention a shirt. This was a shirt design. It's hard for you to read it. This is a bullseye. This shirt was designed by James P. Anderson, who I mentioned is on death row in San Quentin now for 44 years. It has the names, and the names that are on this of men and women who've been shot, who are unarmed people shot by police. And this list is incomplete because almost every week, more people, men and women both, mainly men, Black men and women together, being shot by police. And their cases are always fall through the cracks in the military, in the legal system. Thank you.
And can I just add that those all qualify as state crimes, and that those people who are being tried are by agents of the state. And this is a general critique that's important to make when we have the conversation about land rights, the George's principle of tax reform. Perhaps it could be it could be a standalone. There could also be a roundtable conversation about making transition into the better society. And John Spritzler has his egalitarian revolution. There's I see that multiple. We need to be having simultaneous conversations and bring them together into so that people aren't siloed, but we are together in dialogue of possibilities. And so that's another, just a thought, Gloria.
Okay.
Gloria, can I
wait.
mention the shirt? If anyone wants one of these shirts, they can get in touch with me and I'll send you one. Thank you. Tell me what size you are. Thank you.
And one more thing, Gloria, I have to say to Lou and Jeremy, y'all, I get like this, okay? Don't take me serious, Lou. You're good, okay? You're good. Are you good with me? If you're Jeremy, if
Yeah,
you're good
no,
with
I
me,
mean,
I'm
I
good,
agree
okay?
with the causes you're support. I think that's great. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I know a lot about the Greenwood and the injustice that occurred there. And yeah, I followed the city. The mayor was a hypocrite because he made sure that this lawsuit was dismissed. So that was in the news here. The lawsuit, how they were trying to get some reparations, and the mayor, presented himself as some kind of like this, progressive guy, but he made sure that lawsuit went nowhere.
Okay.
Gloria,
Right. One more. Judy.
You didn't say anything about Myanmar.
Well, we tried, but it seemed that Russia really took took up most of the meeting. And Brian was ill and he didn't get in touch with us, but I mean it's basically all of Southeast Asia is part 2. Okay, right now part 1 is Democrats and Russia. Part 2 will be Republicans and Southeast Asia and overthrowing countries left and right.
Well, it's also Democrats in South. I mean, the Biden Democrat.
True.
Obama, because Obama was a disastrous president. I mean, he orchestrated the pivot to Asia policy, and that got the ball rolling as far as really ramping up pressure on China and circling it militarily. And then that's been carried forward by Biden as much as Trump. So I think Democrats.
They kind of go back and forth, though.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some, maybe this, I don't know, like Bernie Sanders was horrible on Russia and Ukraine, and it's just a lost cause. Even the progressive wing, maybe they're better on China. I don't know. I'd have to follow Sanders, what he says about China.
I don't think they're better on it. I just think that it's like two fronts, and they move the Democratic front, and Russia is the enemy. And then they move the Republican front, and China is the
quietly,
enemy.
I mean,
I just think
escalating with China.
Yeah, no, I think it's
very
both.
quietly.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is more out. His rhetoric is stronger against China. He makes it a feature of his platform. But Biden doesn't necessarily do that. But quietly, he's been really ramping it up against China. I mean, Harris went to Philippines, and they're developing the bases there in the Philippines. And with Taiwan, I mean, Pelosi went to Taiwan, and they've been really ramping up their military aid to Taiwan and turning it into a porcupine. They developed this cute phrase, these academics, oh, we're going to turn Taiwan into a porcupine. It'll be so, lethal that China won't dare do anything. And meanwhile, they're providing billions in arms. And, that's money that should be spent in our community. That's my point. I mean, there's so many needs, and just in the city I live in, the education system, the condition in North Tulsa, where you have more of a Black community. Imagine if some of that money was invested there. That's where it should be invested. So, and that's what the Green Party is about, I think. Or should be
Decentralization.
about.
Yeah, and Gloria, you know you're not going to get off here when you want to get off, but anyone who has evidence that Lloyd Austin is still alive, please email me, okay? Because my people are telling me he got in Ukraine and did not come out.
Hey, let me just jump in. That's
No more. No more jump in.
Okay, bye.
okay, but no, I just want to say about so Elena just left. There's this. I think it's important that we explicitly draw out movement building and the repairing, and part of what appeals to in Elena's work, I think, is, you know, a kind of an earth politics in her perspective. And
I have a meeting on it. We'll devote a whole meeting to it.
let's and I look forward to this community advancing that. So okay, you guys.
Yeah.
Good
So
night.
yeah. So anyway, I don't see much use in concentrating on politicians, because they're just the tools of business interests. And I'd like to know what the business interests, whether big business is pivoting to China, and
Okay, let's end it, and I'll see everybody next week. Love and kisses. Good
and
night.
we should talk about Iran and Pakistan and what's going on there.
We'll get all. There's only so many days in the week and hours in the day. Thank you all. Good night.
Aloha.
Yeah.
Aloha to all.
Okay, good night.